All right, I'll introduce the next presenter, and thank you both again for joining us here. The next
Thanks, Christine.
presenter is Donna Mitroff, president and founder of Mitroff and Associates, whose talk is Shaping the Future, the Role of Media and Entertainment in Our Lives.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here, and I hope you can all hear me. Having a little trouble getting set up. I just want to start by telling you that my background and my expertise is in children's media. I started my career as an ed researcher, and then I moved to WQED in Pittsburgh to work as their director of educational services, and that's where I met Mr. Rogers. I met Fred the first day of my job, and he asked if we could get together and plan something to do together. We ended up spending a lot of time talking because I was not a media person at that time, and an educator. And he wanted to do something to help people with activities. What would they do after they watched the show? We ended up working together to create the Mr. Rogers Plan and Playbook, a whole book of activities to reinforce the things that are happening after you watch the show. That's what got me started with this interest in impact. What is the impact of media? How does it happen? And can we manage it? All of you, including myself, have grown up with media. I actually started with one of the very first shows in children's television was Howdy Doody in the 50s. Even then, there were products that were grown out of the show. In our case, it was the Howdy Doody lunchbox. Kids would come to school carrying their lunch boxes, and we would talk about what happened on the show. That was in the 50s. Many decades later, my colleague, the person who worked with me to create these fabulous slides, Laura Zimmerman, watched Barney. And with Barney, there were not only plush animals to play with, but there were sheets and towels and pillowcases and pajamas and many things to help children remember the shows. Now, I can go back and sing the Howdy Doody theme song, and you can probably go back and sing the Barney theme song. How about those of you in the audience? Just take a minute and think about what you watched when you were growing up and see how it stayed in your mind. This is just to indicate to you that from the things you watch from a very early age, they stick with you. Not only the songs, but a lot of other things, a lot of the behaviors. Well, since those days, media has grown enormously. Common Sense Media in 2011 found that 52% of homes had digital connection. They had mobile devices, but by 2017, it was up to 98%. Not only that, but the number of items that are connected has increased. Years ago, you might have only the TV in the middle of the family room or the living room. But now almost all families have at least 5 connected devices. And some families are what we call hyper-connected, and they will have as much as 10 devices in their household. In that family room or living room, we would see smartphones, tablets, smartwatches, all maybe in the same room, in the same space, or with different members of the family spread out throughout the household. Media and entertainment have and are continuing to shape our lives and shape our culture. Let's take a few examples. This is from my work in children's media. That headline that you see, third grader saves a friend with a Heimlich maneuver. This is true. A child was watching SpongeBob SquarePants and someone applied the Heimlich maneuver. At a later point, he was watching TV with a friend who aspirated a snack. Without even talking about it, that young boy, that third grader, grabbed his friend and performed the Heimlich maneuver and caused his friend to aspirate that snack. That's an example of what we call observational learning. This is one of the theories that we use to understand what's happening with children watching media. Basically, this theory, put forth by Albert Bandura in 1977, says that we learn by observing others. We pick up their behaviors, their attitudes, and their emotional reactions. That's why that young boy learned Heimlich maneuver. The next picture that you see is a character from a TV show from the early 200s. The name of the show was Braceface. It was about the growing up of an adolescent girl and some of the things that happen to better understand adolescence. Alicia Silverstone, the movie star, producer of this series, wanted to do a show about an adolescent girl getting her first period. She wanted to normalize this. There was a big reaction from our production department, and they came to me and said, we can't do this. And I said, we can if we work with a reputable organization, so we do it right. We worked with Kaiser Family Foundation. We did the show. And the payoff for me is this. I was on an airplane going from the West Coast to the East Coast, and a gentleman sitting beside of me while I was reading a lot of Fox Family Channel scripts asked me about that show and said, I want to tell you what happened to me. I walked into the room when my 12-year-old daughter was watching Braceface. I realized what was happening. I sat down and watched it with her. As a result of that experience, that show, I was able to have a conversation with my daughter that I otherwise never would have been able to have. It's also some effects that are happening in the adult world. Movies like Top Gun. The Department of the Navy reported that after that movie, their applications for becoming a naval pilot went up 500%. A show like CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, introduced the world to forensic science. Not long after the show began to air, the lawyers noted that jurists were asking for more forensic information. Forensic is scientifically gathered information. The show ER, which was also on the show in the early 2000s, had a medical doctor on the team. He reviewed every script and made sure that the medical information they were presenting was accurate. That team of people conducted a study to see what people were learning from watching the show. A particular episode about the human papilloma virus was shown, and in a pre and post examination of viewers, what they found is viewers had a better understanding after viewing the episode than they did before. And not only that, but many of them were going to their doctors asking for the test because they recognize they may have some symptoms. Media has an impact. Things have changed so dramatically. TV, for example, has evolved from what used to be appointment television. It was, your show was on at a certain time, you had to watch it at a certain time. Now we have streaming, which is anytime television. You can call up your favorite show at any time. We have more devices now to use. We used to just use the telephone to communicate. Now we have these range of devices that we use to communicate. We're conversing with people on our computer screens, our tablets, and our cell phones. Even our cell phones have become more like computers. There are changes in what's available for kids too. Remember the old computer games like the Oregon Trail? This gave kids a look into the life of pioneers. And look how primitive it looks compared to what we have now. But beyond that, now we have VR. Some of my colleagues are producing a show for middle schoolers called World Wise, which uses VR to take middle schoolers to visit the homes of children their own age in other cultures. For example, they visit the home of a boy in Mexico. They see him get up in the morning, have his breakfast, and then go out to the beach where he particularly is interested in saving the turtles. It's enabling us to get into the life of other people. Look how it's changed in our office. We used to sit around the table, have a conference meeting, and now we go and have Zoom meetings. It's changing at home too. Parents can be doing their work, their children can be sitting there, maybe playing with their tablets, or maybe going to school. But this has created a big difference in what used to be. These changes have also allowed more people to have access to these conferences, like some of you who might not have been able to attend can now attend virtually. And people, for example, physically disabled people who may have trouble traveling can now attend meetings that they couldn't attend before. We're also seeing enormous changes in games for learning and very profound games. In the very young audience, this particular game, Dragon Box Numbers, allows children to develop an intuitive understanding of numbers, not to understand the numeric 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but to understand the value of numbers and how they relate to each other. These are little rods that can be manipulated around. And when you combine two of them, you see what happens when one number value combines with a number to get another number value. Available for middle schoolers is this Happy Atoms game. Happy Atoms is a combination of both physical and electronic learning. Children can play with the physical plastic atoms, stick them together, and create molecules. Once they've put, they're held together by magnets, and once they're put together, they can go to the app, take a picture of what they've created, and find out what molecule they've created without even knowing it, and then they can study that molecule. In the adult world, there are enormous strides in training of medical students. Medical students can practice microbiology. They can learn about diagnosis, all online, and then even more amazing, using virtual reality, they can learn to do surgery on real life bodies, and not real life, of course, but living cells instead of on cadavers. Much less expensive than it used to be to go to medical school and have to cut up a cadaver. Some of the other changes that are happening, look how we're learning language. We used to have to sit in a class, now we can learn from Babbel. VR is taking us to places we couldn't go. Many of you have had the experience, I did, of going undersea, wearing a VR helmet, and such exotic things as implanting chips in our bodies. They're doing this in Sweden, where they're able to implant chips that can be used to make payments, to enter buildings. You don't need a key, you just hold your implanted element up to the lock and it'll open for you. We're using virtual assistants. We're having them turn on our lights and start our crock pots and tell us the weather. And one of the most amazing devices that I'm aware of is this little robot called Moxie. In full disclosure, I have been on the board of this company for a while now, and Moxie is now in beta testing phase, and the results are very good. Moxie was designed to help students on the autism spectrum learn and practice social emotional skills. As you know, that is an issue for children on the autism spectrum and for many kids who are not on the spectrum. So Moxie has the patience and the time to repeat, to give you practice, to send you away to do it with your family, with your friends, and then move on to another activity. Media is also a factor in creating inclusive environments. In many instances, we find that media is separating us. We are going off and working on our individual devices, but media, and especially media and entertainment, can help to bring us together. Here are a couple of examples from our field. Molly of Denali is a show that takes place in Alaska and helps children learn about indigenous peoples, and indigenous members of the indigenous tribes were consultants to every step of creating this show. Doc McStuffins, many of you know about that. An example of a young girl, an African-American girl, who wants to become a doctor and becomes a doctor to her stuffed animals. Not only is little Dottie of Doc McStuffins an African-American girl creating the model that you can be this too, she's in a home in which her father is a stay-at-home dad, something very different from what we used to see. The Barbie doll that has been around for many, many years, the Mattel company has put up video chats on YouTube where Barbie and her friend Nikki are having a conversation in which Barbie is learning some of the different experiences that Nikki has had because of the color of her skin. And we watch Barbie learn to understand what another person is going through. In the entertainment adult programming, this series, This Is Us, takes us into a family which is a blended family, African-American and Caucasians together. One of the members of the family is a drug addict, and how the family deals with that. And another very important member of the family, one of the main players, is a plus-sized woman, and she holds back no punches in talking about what it is like to be a plus-sized woman in today's world. Even companies are doing different things. We recently, my organization, the Children's Media Association, put on an event for the creators of children's media on the subject of why kids need to see themselves reflected in the media they watch. That, of course, is what Doc McStuffins is doing. You can see yourself in these videos, and as one of the children's media companies says, if you can see it, you can be it. Larger companies like Viacom and CBS are setting up guidelines that require, if you want to get a commission, you have to assure them that you will prevent diversity. In another example, we're communicating on Zoom. I attended a birthday Zoom with 30 people from as East Coast to West Coast and as far away as Hawaii. There's a tremendous role and impact of media in both our professional and our personal lives. I remember when fax machines first came out, and I was in the West Coast office, and my main company was in the East Coast office. And the idea of getting a fax machine, some of our executives said that's a waste of money, but we did it, and we were able to communicate. They could send me contracts. They could send me notes on shows. And now, of course, we're doing so much more on our computers, and even questioning whether or not we will ever go back to the office. Will we go back as we did before? Will we go back to school? Will it be partial online and partial at home with our screens? Is this fair? Is it fair for the offices to give up their leases, and we are setting up workspaces at home that we're paying for? It's these things, there's so many things changing, and things are changing in our home life too. Any of you out there who have children know that things have changed dramatically. About 10 years ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics set out some guidelines for children and media. Their recommendation was no screen time for children under the age of 2. And then for children over the age of 2, they recommended only 2 hours. Well, that has certainly changed. Now that children are doing school at home, parents have had to adjust. Where they were very conscientious, trying to follow the guidelines earlier, trying to be aware of how much time their children were spending on screens. Now they're being told it's okay to sit in front of a screen for 3 or 4 hours every day. How is this going to change our culture? How is this going to affect the children who are growing up in this age? What will happen when the COVID crisis is over? Will they all come back to school? Will we continue to have divided learning opportunities? These are very massive changes. And in addition to being pervasive, they are impacting our minds, our bodies, our families, and our jobs. Look at the array of things that we have available to us. With so much available, I urge all of us to ask, what do we want? Whose responsibility is it? It's all of our responsibility to get the media that we want. I know, for example, when I was at Fox Family Channel, they were about to put a kids show on the air, and in my capacity as their learning and children's media person, I said, this is not going to work. Parents are not going to like this show. And the producer said, yeah, but it's funny. I thought it was rather mean and bad-spirited. They put it on the air, and within a couple of hours, there was such a reaction from parents that I heard one of our audience specialists say, if you get one email from somebody, that means that 100 people feel that same way. If you get 5 emails, you better pay attention. When all of the emails came in, they had to cancel the show immediately. Well, back to the first slide I showed you with Howdy Doody. Howdy Doody came on the air and sold Wonder Bread. He told children that Wonder Bread would make you strong. Media researchers began to study the implications of having a popular media host sell product to kids and found that it was a very bad practice. They petitioned the FCC, and now we have rules. A host, you cannot have host selling in a children's TV show. You have to take a break and have that product sold by somebody else. Well, my feeling is we have a voice. We can make changes. We can ask for what we want. And I will take you back to my mentor, Fred Rogers, who has wise sayings about everything. In this case, Fred said, I recently learned that in an average lifetime, A person walks about 65,000 miles. That's 2.5 times around the world. I wonder where your steps will take you. I wonder how you'll use the rest of the miles you're given. That applies to media. That applies to everything. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy now to take some of your questions.
Hi, Donna. I'm just going to jump in here to tell you the questions.
Okay.
So one question, how can institutions involve media and entertainment into learning?
How do they evolve?
Involve, like how can they incorporate media and entertainment into learning?
Well, it's very spotty. Some organizations have an awareness, and more of them do now, have an awareness that whatever we give to children, even though many of them say, I don't want to do an educational show, because of modeling behavior, because of the theory that we know about observational learning, some know that you're teaching them whether you intend to or not. And I talk a lot to media producers about the hidden curriculum, things they're teaching they don't realize that they're teaching. I'll give you an example. Talking to one of the voice assistants who says, Alexa, give me this. We've seen children go out to the playground and say, Billy, do this. They're talking to their friends the way they talk to Alexa. That's teaching. That's education. The thing we have to do is make them aware of what they're doing and help them dig a little deeper and find out what they're offering and whether or not it's what they really want kids to take away from what they're seeing.